we want to talk a little bit about one of the mechanical aspects we did here in Gamma World. Initially, we were, of course, using our standard array. This is, again, before and after, by the way. The before is on the top, and the after is on. Okay, we got it. The initial design was very much like D&D. You pick your ability scores, you assign them. The way that your character generation works right now is you roll random on a table of 20 different possible mutations, right? Or 19, 20?
It's actually 21.
Oh, 21. Well, yeah, if you roll doubles, you get the 21. So you roll on the table, and that determines what your sort of core character is, whether you're part plant or part android or engineered human or whatnot. Pyrokinetic.
Seismic.
All those things. And you get powers associated with that. As you go up in level, based on your level, you get the attack powers and so on that really make you feel like you're part of that theme. But we made you initially just roll or assign your ability scores using the standard array and say, okay, well, figure out what your best stat should be and probably put your 16 in that stat. And that means that your second theme probably doesn't look as good because it's got a 14 in it. And we decided that actually wasn't as fun as just saying, you know what, you just get an 18 in your first stat. Your first roll is Android. Okay, you're 18 for intelligence. Is that Android? I don't remember.
I don't recall off the top of my head.
And your second theme is seismic, so you get a 16 in con. And then if you roll something that shares the same ability score, if you're an intelligent I don't know, Android scientist guy, then you'd get a 20 because both of them are associated with int. And for your rest of your ability scores, you pick up 3d6 and you roll them in order, and you write down the numbers just like we used to do back in the 80s. So yeah, that's sort of one evolution.
I want to jump in now, okay?
You do that.
So you might remember back in the old day with Gamma World that your character had a certain amount of mutations and a certain amount of disadvantageous mutations. And we didn't really want to clutter up the book with a whole lot of disadvantageous mutations and force you to take things like you take damage from sunlight, or weapons do double damage against you, or horrible things like that that are really kind of a beating. I was not real nuts about this idea because I was obviously when I designed it, I designed the first one. But the thing that swayed me over on the idea of you ought to just roll the other ability scores that you probably don't care about much is, if you happen to throw a 5 in dexterity, clearly you have a disadvantage. Maybe you got an 18 in dexterity and you didn't need it. Maybe you got a 5 in dexterity, and now you're just taking -3 on all sorts of things you wish you weren't taking -3 on, like balancing and ranged attacks and things like that. So we felt that this is actually kind of a fun way to say, you're going to have your core mutations that really kind of define your character, and then there's going to be a whole bunch of other stuff that you might be great at and you might be terrible at and you're probably just average at. And that was the thing that kind of brought me over and around to this idea. The interesting thing about Gamma World, by the way, is we had a stage in Gamma World where we actually had a character class template that got slapped on top of your mutations, so that you would, for example, say, hey, I roll once, I've got the seismic power set. I roll twice, I've got the cockroach power set. I guess I'm a seismic cockroach. That's kind of gross, but that's what I am. And then you would slap on top of that your idea of, okay, I want to be a defender. So because I'm a defender, I should get extra healing surges. I should get more hit points. I should get more stuff like that. Or I slap on the leader template because everyone knows you should follow seismic cockroaches. And you would get like a healing word power, and you would get like an ability to help people out and do some target designation type powers. Stuff that we normally would associate with the leader theme, or pardon me, the leader role. But we realized that was actually creating a set of complications that just didn't need to exist, that we could actually roll, when I say roll in this case, I mean like gather in. We could bring a lot of that stuff in together simply into the mutation power sets, the mutation themes, and say, if you're seismic, you're going to be big and rocky and tough, and you're going to be hard to get away from because you're going to make earthquakes around you. you're kind of defenderish. Let's just make the seismic power set a very good defender power set and let that just be the way you determine, you know, what you're doing in the party. In Gamma World, because everyone has access to ranged weapons like fusion rifles and black ray pistols and things like that, and everyone has potentially access to mutations that are great in melee combat or great in ranged combat, there's a lot less difference between the character roles than there would be in D&D. It's not really clear that somebody should be the guy who's on point and somebody should be the guy who's hanging back and doing stuff at a distance. We were willing to let that be more determined by kind of the luck of the draw, and that's where we, that's essentially where we got to with once again letting an initial notion that we had in design just kind of fall out and say it's just not really part of what we need to do here. I'll give it back to you.
All right.
I just had a turn.
All right. Just to talk a few minutes about the Essentials products. The Essentials products are starting in September. We'll provide new builds for the classic D&D archetypes that we're all familiar with, the cleric, the fighter, the wizard, the rogue. While they might have slightly different power acquisition in some cases, you might have seen that in the previews for the Slayer and the Thief, or no, the Knight and the Thief that have been online in the last few weeks, and then I guess the Slayer's going up this Friday. They still fit within the framework of our existing Player's Handbook classes, and they have a very level of complexity. They have simple, or not simple classes, but a reduced number of powers for classes like the Slayer and the Knight, where you don't have to track a larger number of daily attack powers and encounter attack powers. You're able to just use your power strike and your at-will stances as your decision making on a turn-by-turn basis. And we can contrast that with something like the Wizard or the Cleric, which follow more of our traditional Player's Handbook style power acquisition, where they have encounter attack powers, daily attack powers, utility powers, and a lot of different choices they can make from round to round. And it allows for a range of complexity. You can decide to play a class that's a little simpler or a class that's more complex, but you are still as powerful as each other, essentially. That's our goal with that. We're also trying to make the game a little easier to pick up for new players. If you have a new player in your group, or if you want to get new players in your group, the Essentials products are a great way to introduce them to D&D. That's not to say that they are only for new players. There's a lot of really cool stuff in these that might be more appealing to advanced players. One of my playtesters said that he really likes the Slayer and wants to play that over many of the other classes we have. Even though it's a simpler class, he likes the approach that we take. It's very thematic and interesting that way. You want to say anything so far?
With the idea of the character complexity, just to kind of keep beating on this a little bit, certainly it was the case in like first edition, second edition, even third edition, that the fighter was sort of the training wheels class, right? That was the one, somebody's in your game for the first time, you don't hand off the 10th level mage and say, you know, start here, right? You'd be like, here, just play the fighter, right? You're going to make a couple attacks around, you're going to do some damage, try to get in the monster's grill if you can, right, and keep them from beating on the mage, because that's the important guy. But in 4th edition, we lost some of that ability to have a class that could serve as a good stepping stone for the starting player, right? It was the complexity load to play a 4th edition fighter is almost exactly the same as the complexity load to play a 4th edition wizard. I mean, wizards are a little bit more complex because they tend to have more multi-target guys, multi-target effects, and they tend to do more conditions. But by and large, the same sorts of decisions you're being made each time. By taking a look at what can we do to take a couple of classes like the rogue, like the fighter, pull them back a little bit, and let them just be what people kind of expect and want them to be. In the first place, yeah, it's great for new players. In the second place, I think it's also really good for experienced players who simply want to kind of devote their mental resources to something different than tracking the encounter powers and the daily powers that right now you're paying a lot of attention to. It lets you concentrate on things like role-playing, on decision-making, and it'll get a little bit less tactical in some ways and approach a game from a different way. I guess that's about all I got to say on that. I'm just going to talk myself into a circle, but keep up. Oh, yeah, this is the other big part of Essentials, which one of the other things we wanted to do in designing Essentials is we wanted to start to try to drive the creation of game artifacts like spells, like powers, like feats, more from a lens of story rather than pure mechanical niche. So as an example of something that we made an effort to do in the Essentials process, we said, hey, when we introduce a power like Lightning Bolt, let's actually tell you a little bit about Lightning Bolt, right? Let's actually put a bit of flavor text up front to explain what it is, what it's for, when you use it, and be able to actually have that sort of explication that would have happened like 2 editions ago, right? First edition, second edition. That stuff would have been buried in the body of the spell description, and you wouldn't really know if you're looking at rules text or if you're looking at just general theory about what it's supposed to be doing. In 3rd edition, early 4th edition, we tended to pull that stuff out of the spell text and either put it in flavor text like this. We started doing that towards the end of 3rd edition, and obviously through 4th edition. But even then, we were extremely careful to try to avoid saying things in the spell that could be construed as anything other than a rule, because we didn't want to have people say, well, look, it says here it turns this guy into a harmless animal, so, you know, what's that mean? You know, and as much as we like to say, I'm thinking like baleful polymorph here, right, as an example, right? As much as we like to be able to say, it's a harmless animal. Come on, guys. It's like, you know, it's whatever. It can't hurt you. You know, now people are saying, well, what if I put the frog into a cannon and fired it at the guy? You know, with that, it's harmless, right? Would it hurt him or not? It's like, no, that was theory about saying frogs are generally harmless, unless, of course, you put them in cannons. You know, but by and large, this kind of story-based focus would let us be able to say something like, hey, you know, baleful polymorph, you turn something into a harmless animal that couldn't, you know, normally bite you or poison you or do whatever to you. And we can put that sort of information to discussion and sort of the theory and the thinking behind the spell, its place in the world, what it's supposed to do and why it's there. We can get into that a bit more just with a simple change in format and by kind of telling you, let's drive this through what makes a good story and what makes a good piece of the world rather than what's simply filling the niche of, hey, we need a level 7 attack power. Is it level 7? Yeah, oh, good. That was a good guess on my part. I wasn't even looking. That's going to do X amount of damage and this many targets, and it's going to be electricity damage, so I guess it's Lightning Bolt. So this is a place where we're taking trying a somewhat new direction in how we approach designing our products.